Welcome to Nazir Fears, where fear finds you. Do you dare to enter a world of unspeakable horror and chilling mysteries? If you love creepy true stories, urban legends, haunted places, and terrifying experiences, you're in the right place.
Like, subscribe, share, and click that bell icon.
Alone in the abandoned hospital. Eleanor Steele had always been fascinated by the abandoned Brighton Memorial Hospital. Its windows were shattered, and the walls were covered in layers of grime and graffiti. Yet she felt drawn to it, as if something in her very bones knew the building was alive. She had heard stories about the hospital, of patients who vanished, of doctors who experimented in the night, but Eleanor dismissed most of it as urban legend. That Friday night, she decided to explore the hospital alone, armed with only her flashlight, a camera, and a small backpack of supplies. She parked her car on the overgrown lot, her boots crunching against gravel, and stared at the imposing structure. The moonlight highlighted the peeling paint and rusted metal of the entrance. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the heavy doors, which groaned in protest. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the scent of decay hit her immediately. Her flashlight illuminated a long corridor lined with doors, many hanging off their hinges. Eleanor's heart raced with excitement and trepidation. She stepped carefully, her flashlight beam dancing across broken tiles and discarded medical equipment. She could hear the faint drip of water somewhere deep inside, echoing through the empty halls. Eleanor moved forward, passing the old reception desk, where a dusty ledger lay open, pages yellowed and curling. She flipped through it briefly, seeing patient names, dates, and cryptic notes that suggested something more sinister had taken place here. In the corner of the lobby, she noticed a wheelchair overturned, as though it had been abandoned mid-escape. Eleanor shivered but pressed onward, determined to reach the upper floors. The stairwell creaked under her weight as she ascended, each step echoing like a gunshot in the emptiness. On the second floor, the corridor stretched endlessly, and the darkness seemed thicker, heavier. She paused outside a door labeled Pediatric Wing, its paint faded and chipped. The door was ajar. Eleanor's curiosity got the better of her, and she nudged it open. The room was littered with small beds, broken toys, and old medical charts. A faint smell of antiseptic lingered, mingled with the unmistakable scent of decay. As she stepped inside, the floorboards groaned under her weight. Eleanor's flashlight swept across the room, revealing a small, pale figure standing at the far end, almost blending with the shadows. She froze. "Hello?" Eleanor called, her voice trembling. No response. The figure remained still, silent, and when Eleanor blinked, it seemed to vanish. Her pulse quickened, but she pressed on, trying to rationalize what she had seen. She moved deeper into the wing, noticing marks on the walls, handprints smeared with something dark, stains that weren't entirely rust or dirt. Eleanor's stomach turned, but the thrill of discovery pushed her forward. She entered the nurse's station, its cabinets hanging, open files scattered across the floor. As she examined them, she noticed repeated mentions of a patient named Alan Pierce. The notes were cryptic, referencing experiments, isolation, and warnings about the ones who don't leave. Eleanor frowned, a cold chill crawling down her spine. She suddenly heard the sound of soft footsteps behind her. Spinning around, her flashlight beam cut across the empty corridor. Nothing. She whispered her own name, trying to reassure herself. The footsteps continued, light, almost playful, echoing just out of sight. Eleanor's instincts screamed at her to leave, but the compulsion to understand the hospital's secrets kept her rooted. She moved toward the end of the hallway, where the pediatric wing led to a service corridor she had never seen on any hospital map. The air grew colder, and a faint whispering reached her ears. Eleanor paused, straining to understand the words. "Don't leave," they murmured. Goosebumps rose across her arms. She shone her flashlight along the corridor, and at the far end, she saw dozens of small, pale hands pressing against the walls, as if trying to escape. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. She stepped back, her foot catching on debris. A soft giggle echoed behind her. Turning, she saw a little boy, his face pale, eyes dark and hollow, staring at her from the shadows. Eleanor tried to speak, but no words came. The boy raised his hand, pointing toward a door partially hidden behind a rusted storage cart. Compelled by fear and curiosity, Eleanor approached. The door led to a narrow stairwell descending into the basement. As she stepped down, the air became heavier, damp and suffocating. Her flashlight flickered. Eleanor gripped it tightly, taking cautious steps. The basement was a labyrinth of storage rooms and old hospital equipment. She noticed wheelchairs stacked in corners, some tipped over, as if abandoned mid-use. A faint sound of dragging metal echoed from the far end of the hallway. Eleanor froze. The sound grew closer. She shone her light toward it, but saw nothing. A shadow darted across the wall. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She whispered to herself, "It's just an old building. Just an old building." But she knew instinctively that she was not alone. The whispers grew louder, surrounding her now, coming from every dark corner. "Stay! Don't leave!" Eleanor's legs trembled. She felt a hand brush against her ankle. She jumped, spinning around, flashlight catching a small, pale figure at the far end of the hallway. Its eyes were wide and black, its mouth opening in a silent scream. Eleanor stumbled backward, tripping over a rusted gurney. Her flashlight clattered to the floor, flickering and casting grotesque shadows across the walls. She scrambled to her feet, heart racing, adrenaline pumping. Every instinct told her to run, but the layout of the basement was unfamiliar, corridors twisting in impossible ways. Eleanor tried one hallway, only to find herself back where she had started, facing the pale figure again. It wasn't alone. Behind it, dozens of small, shadowy figures emerged from the darkness, their eyes hollow, reaching toward her with tiny, desperate hands. Eleanor screamed, spinning to find an exit, but the basement seemed to stretch endlessly, corridors bending and twisting unnaturally. The figures floated silently, gliding toward her without sound, their giggles echoing like nails on a chalkboard. Eleanor remembered the name from the files, Alan Pierce. Could he have been behind this? Or was he one of them, trapped like the rest? Panic surged. She stumbled into an old supply room, slamming the door behind her. The room was pitch black except for her flickering flashlight. She leaned against the door, gasping, listening. The whispering continued, now right outside, scratching, clawing, pleading. Eleanor backed into a corner, realizing she couldn't stay. She kicked the door, trying to escape, but the handle refused to budge. The pale children outside began to pound softly, their tiny hands hitting the door in rhythm, growing louder, more insistent. Eleanor's mind raced. She remembered the old service elevator she had seen near the stairwell. Maybe it still worked. She ran back, flashlight flickering, the shadows dancing wildly on the walls. Reaching the elevator, she pressed the button repeatedly. A faint creak signaled it moving. The basement corridor seemed to stretch longer, shadows multiplying. Eleanor stepped inside the elevator, pressing the button for the ground floor. The doors closed slowly, squeezing her in darkness. She heard the faintest whisper, directly behind her ear. "Don't go." The elevator shuddered, then ascended. When it opened, the hospital lobby looked abandoned, empty, silent. Eleanor stumbled out, taking a deep breath, relief flooding her senses. She ran toward the exit, almost tripping over the broken reception desk. Outside, the night was still, the hospital looming in eerie silence. She reached her car, hands shaking, heart pounding. She glanced back. Through the shattered windows, she thought she saw dozens of pale faces pressed against the glass, watching her leave. Eleanor didn't wait. She started the car and drove away, never daring to look back. Eleanor Steele couldn't stop trembling as she drove down the dark, overgrown path, away from Brighton Memorial Hospital. Her mind replayed every shadow, every whisper, and the countless pale, hollow-eyed figures she had glimpsed. Even in the safety of her car, she felt the lingering weight of the hospital pressing on her, as if the walls themselves had followed her into the night. She reached home, but sleep refused her. The memory of those small hands pounding against the basement doors haunted her every thought. She tried to distract herself with work, with television, even with phone calls to friends, but nothing could erase the images from her mind. The following night, Eleanor felt compelled to return, though she didn't understand why. She told herself it was curiosity, or perhaps the need to prove to herself that what she had experienced was real. Armed again with her flashlight, camera, and a sense of dread she could not shake, Eleanor drove back to the hospital. The building appeared different in the moonlight, its broken windows reflecting silver, shadows stretching unnaturally across the crumbling facade. She parked, grabbed her backpack, and approached the entrance. Pushing open the heavy doors, she felt the same cold, musty air greet her. The lobby was untouched, dust thick on the floor, the broken reception desk in the same position. Eleanor's heartbeat quickened. She wasn't sure whether she wanted to enter or run away. She forced herself forward, following the long corridors to the stairwell leading to the pediatric wing. The hallways seemed longer than before, twisting slightly with each step. Eleanor noticed that some doors she had passed the previous night were now closed, sealed as if waiting for her return. She reached the pediatric wing and paused outside the familiar door. The room was darker than she remembered. Her flashlight flickered as she stepped inside. The beds were still, the toys undisturbed, yet a sense of awareness hung thick in the air. Eleanor felt it before she saw it. A soft whisper, calling her name from the far corner. "Eleanor," she murmured, her voice trembling. Slowly, the shadows shifted. A small figure appeared, a pale boy with hollow eyes, just as she had seen before. He didn't speak, but gestured toward a small door at the back of the room. Eleanor's curiosity, combined with fear, propelled her forward. She opened the door, revealing the basement stairwell she had discovered the previous night. The air was colder, heavier, and the whispers intensified. Eleanor descended cautiously, her flashlight barely illuminating the narrow stairs. The basement corridor stretched endlessly, shadows multiplying as she moved forward. She noticed subtle differences. The walls now bore strange markings, numbers scrawled in dark ink, and footprints that seemed too small and too numerous to belong to any adult. Eleanor's pulse quickened. The dragging sound she had heard before returned, echoing along the walls, a faint rhythm that seemed to follow her every step. She reached the first storage room and froze. Dozens of pale figures, small children with hollow eyes, were pressed against the walls, reaching toward her. Their whispers filled her mind, a cacophony of pleading and warning. "Stay! Don't leave! Play!" Eleanor backed away, almost tripping over debris. She realized that the hospital was alive, feeding on the fear it created. She turned toward another hallway, hoping to find the service elevator again, but the corridors twisted unnaturally. Every hallway she took seemed to loop back on itself. The figures followed silently, their eyes glowing, faintly in the shadows. Eleanor's flashlight flickered violently, plunging her into momentary darkness. In that instant, she felt a hand brush against her shoulder. She spun, but no one was there. Panic surged. She ran, darting through narrow passages, the whispers now louder, insistent, echoing off the walls. Eleanor stumbled upon a large storage room filled with abandoned hospital beds. She thought she saw movement among them, figures sliding beneath sheets, reaching out with skeletal hands. She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the oppressive darkness. There, in the corner, she noticed a small wooden door she had not seen before. Compelled by a mix of fear and irresistible curiosity, she opened it. Inside was a tiny room, almost like a cell, filled with old patient charts, broken toys, and dozens of small chairs. The walls seemed to pulse subtly, breathing with an unseen energy. Eleanor realized with terror that this was the heart of the hospital, the source of the voices and shadows she had encountered. A figure stepped forward from the darkness. Alan Pierce. Eleanor's mind recoiled at the sight. He was pale, gaunt, with eyes black and empty. His mouth opened, but no sound came. Around him, dozens of small children emerged from the shadows, their hands reaching toward Eleanor, their faces expressionless. She felt herself pulled toward them, a magnetic force she could not resist. She struggled, kicking and pushing, but the hospital seemed to resist her escape. The whispers became deafening, merging into one horrifying voice. "Join us. Stay forever." Eleanor's instincts screamed at her to run. Summoning every ounce of strength, she darted toward the stairwell and scrambled upward. The walls twisted as she ran, the corridors elongating impossibly. Shadows lunged at her from the corners, reaching for her with tiny, desperate hands. Eleanor felt the cold brush of fingers against her skin, almost tangible, almost alive. She stumbled onto the second floor, gasping for air. The pediatric wing seemed quieter now, the shadows receding slightly, but the sense of awareness remained. Eleanor glanced toward the lobby. The reception desk was empty, yet she felt a weight pressing down on her chest. Determined to leave, she retraced her steps to the main entrance. Outside, the night was still, the moon casting silver light over the decaying structure. Eleanor ran to her car, fumbling with the keys. She glanced back, heart hammering. In the windows of the hospital, dozens of pale faces pressed against the glass, watching, waiting. Eleanor didn't stop the car until the hospital was far behind her, swallowed by darkness. But even then, she felt the weight of it. She could not shake the whispers. She could not forget the eyes. The hospital had followed her, its presence lingering, invisible, yet tangible. That night, Eleanor slept lightly, a sense of being watched pressing on her chest. In her dreams, the corridors twisted endlessly, the shadows crawling toward her, the small hands reaching from walls, ceilings, and floors. She woke in a cold sweat, the whispers still echoing faintly in her ears. Eleanor Steele could not shake the feeling that Brighton Memorial Hospital had followed her home. Even after driving miles away, her mind replayed the twisting hallways, the hollow eyes of the children, and the gaunt figure of Alan Pierce. Sleep offered no relief. Every creak in her apartment sounded like the echo of dragging footsteps. Every shadow flickering across the walls seemed to stretch unnaturally. She tried to convince herself that it had been a hallucination, a product of adrenaline and fear. Yet the small, broken toy she had taken from the hospital sat on her bedside table, its presence a silent accusation. Days passed, and Eleanor became obsessed with the hospital, poring over old newspapers and patient files, trying to uncover its history. She discovered reports of missing children, of patients locked in rooms for days, even weeks, without explanation. Names repeated, Alan Pierce included, and rumors of experiments gone wrong haunted her research. Eleanor felt the threads of reality fraying around her. The whispers started again, faint at first, then growing louder during the quiet moments of her apartment. "Eleanor, come back. Play." She could hear them, though she was alone. One evening, Eleanor returned to the hospital, unable to resist the pull any longer. She parked outside, the building looming like a sentinel in the moonlight. Pushing open the doors, she felt the same musty air, the same cold draft, the same oppressive weight she had felt before. The lobby was untouched, yet the shadows seemed thicker, moving with purpose. Eleanor moved towards the pediatric wing, her flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. Every corridor seemed alive, walls bending subtly as she walked, as if the building were guiding her. She entered the stairwell to the basement, and the whispers grew louder. Eleanor descended carefully, each step echoing unnaturally. The basement had changed. The storage rooms were filled with old hospital beds, wheelchairs and toys strewn about, as if the hospital itself had grown restless. The dragging sound returned, closer, following her through the twisting corridors. Eleanor felt the unmistakable weight of unseen hands brushing against her arms and legs, urging her onward. At the end of the hallway, she saw the small wooden door again, the heart of the hospital. She opened it, stepping into the tiny cell-like room filled with toys, charts, and dozens of small chairs. The walls seemed to pulse, breathing with an unseen life. From the shadows, Alan Pierce emerged, gaunt and pale, his hollow eyes fixed on Eleanor. Behind him, dozens of pale children surfaced from the corners, their hands reaching out, their whispers forming a chorus of silent plea and menace. Eleanor realized the truth. The hospital had never been abandoned. It had been waiting for someone like her to arrive, to witness, to become part of its twisted history. She backed away, trying to escape, but the corridors shifted impossibly, trapping her in the heart of the building. She ran blindly, twisting through hallways that seemed to stretch on forever. The whispers intensified, merging into one omnipresent voice. "Join us. Stay forever." Eleanor stumbled into a room she hadn't seen before, lined with mirrors that reflected not her own image, but that of the hollow-eyed children, reaching for her from behind the glass. Panic surged. She grabbed a nearby gurney, using it to block the mirrors, and ran toward a faint light at the far end. She emerged into a hallway she recognized, the path to the elevator. The service elevator doors groaned open. Eleanor stumbled inside, pressing the button for the ground floor. The elevator descended slowly, every second feeling like an eternity. She could hear the whispers, soft yet persistent, seeping through the walls of the elevator, pressing against her mind. The doors opened to the lobby. Eleanor bolted, not looking back. She reached the front doors and threw them open, the cold night air washing over her like a release. She ran to her car, fumbling with the keys, heart hammering, mind racing. When she looked back, the hospital was still, silent, seemingly abandoned. But Eleanor knew the truth. Brighton Memorial Hospital had not let her go. The weight of it lingered in her chest, a constant, invisible presence. That night, she awoke to the faint sound of dragging wheels, like an old wheelchair moving across the floor. Her apartment walls seemed to stretch, corridors forming in her peripheral vision, shadows crawling closer. She clutched the broken toy from the hospital, its eyes glinting faintly in the darkness, and realized that whatever resided in the hospital had followed her home. The whispers returned, louder now, insistent, almost angry. "Eleanor, come back, play." Panic surged, and she tried to flee her apartment, but the shadows twisted around her, elongating, merging with the walls, filling the space. Eleanor screamed, but no sound came. The building of her own home seemed to mimic the hospital. Corridors shifting, doors vanishing, windows reflecting hollow-eyed children. She understood then, with a terror that froze her blood, she would never be free. Brighton Memorial Hospital had claimed her, its presence unrelenting, its whispers eternal. The small toy she held pulsed faintly, alive, a tether connecting her to the hospital's heart. Eleanor Steele realized she had become part of the story, another ghostly witness trapped in its endless cycle. Outside, the world remained oblivious. The moon cast silver light over the streets, cars passed by, and life went on. But inside Eleanor's mind, the hospital corridors stretched endlessly, the children's hands reaching, the whispers calling her name. She could not escape, and every night, she felt it. Brighton Memorial Hospital, alive, watching, waiting, whispering, forever.